Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise. We don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle. And today I found out that a lot of the hit stars of the UFO community have a podcast awards show. Niall?
There's a podcasting award show for conspiracy podcasts?
For aliens specifically.
Aliens?
UFO stuff.
How do we get nominated?
That's a good question. It's called Parapod Festival, but it's got a lot of interesting people attached to it. So I don't know. I mean, Linda Moulton Howe is like one of the main people at this event, and I'm just saying,
Is Exopolitics Daily with Dr. Michael Salla on there?
I don't know. I don't think so, but
okay.
I just was kind of looking at that today and thinking like, damn, I just based off of some of the people who ended up on the, although I do wonder if they have somebody who has to sit and listen to episodes that are suggested for the podcasts. And as soon as we're just Linda Moulton Howe was probably used by Richard Doty to, put out a bunch of disinfo in the UFO community, then maybe they hear that and they go, let's not have these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we need to find a body like that doesn't really listen to the episodes. They just kind of have us there without any background, because I feel like if you listen to one of our episodes and you're looking for a serious UFO podcast, you'll kind of get mad at us pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we have to do a Trojan horse episode where we do a very just serious, thoughtful discussion about a UFO thing, and send that one, and then worm our way in that way.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I don't think that it's I think it is possible for us to have a legitimately serious conversation about the topic, but it may not be the it may not be the predominant belief about UFOs. And we may not conform. Are you saying that
you don't believe fully in the UFO phenomenon?
No, not really. And but if the emails that we get from people who want to interact with us in that community are any indication, then maybe they don't actually listen to the shows. And we could just
emails that we've gotten, I'm pretty sure they have not.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. People will contact us and be like, let me onto your show right this instant. I need to tell you all about how you're being mind controlled by the government. And
I've got a new book coming out. It's on how the government has implanted things in your nards.
Please join our network. I promise. We just want you to invest in our network. We love the show. By the way, you say the funniest things about aliens. So those are the kinds of emails that we get, and I don't think people are actually listening to the show when they contact us, except for you, dear listener, who does email us. We have a couple people who email us and send us some nice stuff. So thank you.
We're growing our whack pack.
Yes,
people that actually listen to the show.
Yes.
So
Weird John being the first name that comes to mind. It feels unfair to call them whack pack, but I think they know what we mean when we say whack pack. The weird beards. So wait, hold up. Hold on a second. Are you saying that somehow the listeners emailing us are beards for us?
No. but I think we could try to work with that. I would have been really fun if I had said yes and actually come up with a way that
Okay.
that is true. But in reality, I was I was not expecting you I thought you were going to say that our podcast helps people grow beards, and I had a fucking Rogaine joke in the chamber.
Okay.
And then when you said the other thing, I was very it took me back.
Yeah,
So I apologize.
No, that's okay. I mean, sometimes you do a yes and, sometimes you do a no, maybe this though. So, yeah, we could do your Rogaine thing. Our listeners are helping us grow beards, you're saying?
I was saying that listening to our podcast is more effective than taking Rogaine.
Okay.
In terms of like growing whatever. Really, honestly, it's not just facial hair; it's whatever hair you want to make.
Yeah.
So anyone, if you need hair growth,
just generally, if you want your pit hairs to get real out of control, you just got to listen to the show. If you want your thatch downstairs to be just a gnarled mass.
Yeah,
we'll do that for you. You just got to listen.
Yeah, if you want that shit to look like a black metal logo, listen to It Gets Weird.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I am kind of glad that you started off by talking about UFO stuff, because today we are going to be in that realm.
That's amazing. I love that for me.
You even like mentioning Richard Doty, I realized that we're growing the the core touch points of the show in terms. I feel like lately we've been in this kind of modern UFO type stuff kind of place, like talking about all of our disinformation stuff, all of the like exopolitics stuff, all of like, and today's episode kind of has ties to all of that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I unintentionally, when I looked into this, I wasn't planning on it being this directly tied to other stuff we've talked about lately, but it was kind of a happy accident.
People can listen to this show and just follow our like neural pathways, really. Like it's not.
If I ever decide to start seeing a psychiatrist, I'm just going to tell them I did every other episode of this show doing the research, and you can track my mental health that way.
Yeah. So and there's a different sort of aspect to your mental health that they can track through my episodes.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. It's pretty easy to follow.
Like the once a year I get really mad during one of your episodes about something and like rant for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Been there.
So this week, Kyle.
Yeah.
I wanted to look into, we've talked about a lot of stuff about UFO sightings, even UFO crashes. And the concept of crash retrieval has come up quite a few times across the span of It Gets Weird. And so today I wanted to talk about some organizations and projects that are tied to UFO crash retrieval.
Okay.
And also one of the main whistleblowers in this area, one Clifford Stone.
Interesting. Now, I'm sure it's out there, but you're making me realize that I haven't done a whole lot of research into like specific units of like the agents or whoever are conducting like cover-ups in these stories. Like, for some reason, my mind's going back to the fact that like the original quote unquote recovery unit for the Roswell crash, and I think the people who maybe you're going to get into this, but it was like what they were like the nuclear bomb squad from Hiroshima. They dropped little baby boy and fat man or whatever.
Yeah. We will talk about that. There is a whole thing here about kind of the history of UFO crash retrieval, what it means, what it's intended to be, and also like the people involved in blowing the whistle on the actuality of it.
That's awesome.
So we're going to talk about that today.
Okay.
So I wanted to do this because I've every time I'm looking for a new topic, I'm always like, okay, what is a thing that I just haven't thought about in something we've done before, and where can I get a stepping off point for this? So like I really just had in my notes the name Clifford Stone as like a possible topic, and then when I was looking, I was like, this is perfect, because it's a side of this stuff we never talked about. We've talked about the Men in Black. We've talked about the UFO disinformation campaign. We've talked about whether or not the UFOs are actually UFOs or if they're something, Soviet spycraft or whatever, which we'll also talk about in this. But we never talked about the crash retrieval. So today, we're going to start by talking about Project Moondust and Project Blue Fly. These are two secret U.S. Air Force projects. One kind of started, they both started during the Cold War, but they kind of have slightly different intention, ideas of what they're doing. Basically, Moondust is the project that actually goes and retrieves everything, and then Blue Fly is the people that take that hardware that they recover and try to like work with it. So
Okay.
they're kind of two halves of the same whole.
So I'm assuming, okay, so maybe you'll get into this as well, but like, are these projects that have associated like declassified documents, or are we just like fully in like ufology, like dreamland storybook time?
Moondust especially has declassified documents.
Okay.
You can find them online. They're on the Biblioteca site. They're all over the place. You can, if you look up Project Moondust, especially through there's ties to like Project Disinformation or Project Disclosure, the Disclosure Project, and all those kinds of things as well. And the reason we have some of these documents is because of the guy Clifford Stone, who was a military person who worked in this unit and then has spent his time post-military life trying to use the Freedom of Information Act to get documents about these things out to the public, because he believes in that there is a moral deficiency to disclosure, and there should be full-blown all information should be out there.
I was going to ask if this guy was an FOIA warrior, and
big time.
Lo and behold, I feel like I've heard the name before. I had to have heard the name before based on this, but
not to get ahead of myself, but I know where you heard the name before, or at least one place.
Okay, well,
because this guy is a talking head in where do I have the actual name of it? Because I want it's a hard name to remember exactly.
He was on what more songs about food and fast food and
Yeah.
what's that album called?
Yeah. More songs about food and fucking. Or
Food and fucking. That's not.
That's not
You're
it.
confusing Big Black songs about fucking and a Talking Heads song album a little bit, I think.
More songs about politics and food or something like that.
Something like that. I don't remember.
But one place that I know you have seen this guy, is he was a talking head in Alien Encounters from New Tomorrowland.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. That's coming together, which that's the infamous episode where we spent a good 15 minutes of it or so talking about turning the Disney CEO into red paste.
A fine mist.
A fine mist.
Was that a Patreon bonus episode?
No, that was a main feed thing. That was like our party episode, last hurrah with everybody together.
I just couldn't remember where it got published, so I wanted to use it to pitch the Patreon if we it wasn't on there.
Hey, check out the Patreon anyways, and patreon.com/shitgetsweird. And I also wanted to say, I had another thought, and let me see if I can. Give me a second. I'm going to cast my David Lynch style. I'm going to cast my lure out into the ocean of thought and see if I can reel that shit back in. We were talking about declassified projects. So like. Mm-hmm. You can tell me, or maybe this will become more clear as we go on, but like whenever I hear a UFO conspiracy where they like cite actual declassified Freedom of Information Act documents, I tend to assume it's kind of like how MK Ultra became synonymous with like legitimate evidence of like mind control and remote viewing, even though if you actually like dig into the documents, it doesn't really seem to suggest that it worked. Am I kind of, does that sound about right to you?
Kind of. I mean, in terms of the MK Ultra stuff, yes. But in terms of this, the thing, the line, let me just start by what these projects are, the actual reason these projects exist, and then we can talk about how conspiracies use them.
Okay.
Because they like it. This is really a thing that comes down to what you consider a UFO.
Sure.
Depending on how you take these documents, because all the classified documents will cite UFOs, but the stated purpose of Project Moondust is that it was a covert U.S. Air Force project during the Cold War that went out of the Holloman Air Force Base, and the aim of the project was to recover objects and debris from craft that survived reentry through the atmosphere back to Earth, and exploit the discovery of any Soviet hardware when it would fall into American hands. So this was basically to recover crashed Soviet spy planes.
Yeah,
and stuff like
okay.
that, and satellites. Same with Blue Fly. Blue Fly was basically the step 2 of this whole thing, where Moondust picks up all of the debris and gathers everything and has all like does the initial steps, and then Blue Fly takes that technology and either reverse engineers it, commandeers it, whatever is necessary.
Okay, so nothing about that suggests aliens to me yet.
Yes, it's the use of the term spacecraft and the use of the term UFO in like the actual released documents that are of course are redacted and stuff, like, but they do mention, they use the term UFO as just, we don't know what, like, any unknown craft. And that has basically, through some FOIA stuff and from the best way to explain that why this is such a big thing in UFO stuff is because Clifford Stone, first of all, claims it is. He claims that he worked in this project, worked as crash retrieval, and has all this stuff. He has a whole book that he wrote about this stuff. But also that the Air Force was caught in some like half-truths, some lies, some trying to cover stuff up in the FOIA requests, and they were continuously proven to be trying to cover something up. So because they were trying to like not get free all the documents at once, people take it as confirmation that they actually are talking about aliens, not confirmation that they just don't want to release documents at all. So there's that aspect to it, where like it turned into this like cat and mouse game between Clifford Stone and similar kind of disclosure people for this topic, and the Air Force, in like, hey, in document 1 that we got last year, you mentioned this, but then now you're denying it. What does that mean? Give us any documents about that. And then the Air Force has to give them a little more because they were caught in a lie. And then, so that is the order of how all this shit happened. That is how this became what it is.
Okay, now let me put on my conspiracy cap for a second. About when does Clifford Stone start coming out to, put the government on blast with the Freedom of Information Act? Do you know?
It's in, his book comes out, I think, in the 90s.
Okay, so
maybe late 80s.
The Freedom of Information Act
here somewhere.
is like well established at this point.
Yeah, he has been like active. So, oh God, sorry, I have this stuff's way later in my notes, so I'm having to go down because I have a bunch of stuff about Project Moon.
I'm sorry I had to do it to you.
It's he served 22 years in the military, and that started, I believe, in the 60s. So he then would go on to do a bunch of other stuff after that, in terms of like actually getting into the Freedom of Information Act stuff and doing all of the circuits of disclosure conferences and stuff.
I think the freedom.
He went in during the Vietnam War.
Okay.
That is his time frame.
I think the Freedom of Information Act is established in that same decade, in the 60s. And I don't know, just like my conspiracy cap, I'm always distrusting of like ex-military, ex-government people, especially after reading the Richard Doty story, that like there is, something suspicious about a former military person, coming forward and just being like, it's very important with these government documents that we disclose UFO truths. It always smells fishy to me, but we can get into that later if you want.
Oh, for sure. Cause there's a thing, there's some stuff. I'll say this. Clifford Stone died in 2021.
Oh, shit.
I have stuff from his obituary that talks a little bit more about some stuff that we'll get into.
Okay.
So I have some information on how he's kind of viewed in the UFO community and where his friendships and stuff lie a little bit. So we will get into that, but I want to start with some stuff about Project Moondust if we can.
I'll allow it.
So most of my info on Moondust and also some of the background on Stone, including the obituary that I mentioned a little bit ago, come from a person named Lieutenant Colonel Kevin D. Randall, who is one of the biggest people in terms of like books on Roswell. He's ex-Army, ex-Air Force, has a PhD in journalism, and also is a current author and ufologist, who's written many books on the subject. Most of his books are about Roswell and similar large-scale UFO cases, but he also has a couple books on a thing that we will also be talking about in this episode a little bit. He has 2 books on the Majestic 12. So he is mostly known for the Roswell stuff, and because of that, he has dealt with Clifford Stone quite a bit, knew him personally, and also seems to have some thoughts on the guy. It's hard. Okay, so generally, I'm not getting into that now. We'll talk about Kevin Randall. Has written more than 80 books, which I think is funny because like there's like 20 of them or so are like on UFOs, and then he wrote like a bunch of fiction under pseudonyms. So he just has like whole series of sci-fi novels and stuff that he's written under other names that are on his Wikipedia. So it goes from like all these conspiracy books to just like sci-fi adventure novels into like maybe like some horror books and stuff. He has like multiple pseudonyms. It's an interesting smattering of work, but he has really done a lot in terms of like researching Roswell, and being one of the leading researchers into the whole thing. And so he's a pretty big deal in this regard. He published his first article about UFOs in 1972 and continues to write more about alien abduction, photographic cases, and cattle mutilations was one of the first things he really started to write about in 1975.
The 70s is the big decade for that.
Yep.
When was he writing about Roswell exactly?
For like starting in like the 70s and going all the way up until like 2006. Like the guy has written a lot of books, and as far as I know, seems to continue to put out books. And he also has a blog that where I found a lot of stuff on these guys. So we can, that's a big place that I did a lot of reading. He also does research into like the Shag Harbor UFO crash and all these other things. So he has done a lot of stuff with talking to and around Clifford Stone because he deals a lot with like UFO crashes. He has gotten like more skeptical as time has gone on, to the point where now he even isn't fully sure that Roswell was an ET. But in general, he is kind of skeptical. So I'm focusing a bit on Randall because I wanted to give context to a lot of the information that I'm giving here, because because it was so much from one source, and I read other stuff about Moondust as well. It wasn't just him, but the lens through which he views things is he feels that he needs a very high bar of evidence to believe any crash is real or any UFO event is real. So he thinks that most UFO cases throughout history are nonsense. He thinks that he likens a lot of people's abductees experiences to being like sleep paralysis, and generally is pretty skeptical when it comes to trusting anyone in here, as far as I can tell.
Does that have anything to do with the fact that he was writing about the Majestic 12, and it sounds like he was doing a lot of writing around the time that Bill Moore, came out and admitted that he was bullshitting?
Yeah, his Majestic 12 books were in 1994 and then 2002. So, like, a long time after a lot of this stuff. So I don't know how... I don't know how, like, the Majestic 12 stuff... Because it feels like it's come in multiple waves, and he feels like he's more on the... remember the episode that I did on the Majestic 12 that was like, yeah, there's the thing that you're talking about in your old episode about the actual thing, and then there's the, like, secret conspiracy version that people have turned it into now. It's like, Majestic 12 V2 seems to be more his lane. But I'm not entirely sure about that because I didn't read those books. I read books on Moondust. But he has like a whole book on Moondust called Project Moondust Beyond Roswell, exposing the government's covert investigations and cover-ups from 1999, along with just a bunch of other books. He's got a shit ton of UFO books here.
King shit.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you got to keep busy. So he details in an article just entitled Project Moondust, with the history of Project Moondust being the subtitle, the whole like history of this project. It was and all of this stuff was found by Freedom of Information Act requests through the various congressional subbodies and even the U.S. Air Force itself. There basically was this letter from Lieutenant Colonel John E. Madison that stated, "There is no agency, nor has there ever been at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which would deal with UFOs or have any information about the incident in Roswell. In addition, there is no Project Moondust or Operation Blue Fly. Those missions have never existed." So this was like an official government release for them back in I believe in the 1990s. And they were able to, through other requests, prove it entirely wrong. That not the UFO part, but the fact that Project Moondust and Blue Fly exist.
Yeah, they existed. I see.
So this like back and forth tennis match of Freedom of Information Act requests is the reason we have any of this information, even if the information that has been skewed into being about aliens as opposed to being about recovering downed Soviet spycraft.
Do you think that they had somebody in the archives just like, oh shit, make sure the documents don't actually mention any of the like spy planes and shit. Just like put white out over it and put UFO there. Okay. God, oh God, we have to put these out soon.
Yeah. It really feels like during a certain era of the Freedom of Information Act request stuff, like once the UFO community really got a hold of that, it took the establishment a bit by surprise. So they were kind of scrambling to like figure out how to deal with this shit.
Yeah.
Because this is an era of ufology that I've gotten interested in recently and have been reading random shit about and doing episodes about. It really feels like there are times where like the government just kind of fucks up with Freedom of Information Act requests. And they like slip out something they shouldn't have, or like don't like answer something in a more definitive way than they should have. And it leaves these little doors, these little wedges open for ufologists to really just like run with. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell if that's a new disinformation tactic or if it's just like the people aren't expecting to deal with these UFO people and don't know how to handle it well.
Yeah, you know? It's hard to say, but like, you know, we're a conspiracy podcast, and I think that if you want people to have a collective aneurysm about the information that you're going to divulge, then you do what you described, right? Like you make it extra confusing and weird. So I don't know, but who knows? I mean, it could honestly, I'd imagine it would be both at one point or another.
Yeah. So that whole like little chess game that they played led to the supervisor above Johnny Madison, named Mattingly, Colonel George M. Mattingly Jr., wrote an amended version of a response to these people that basically did a full 180. So this response states, in 1953, during the Korean War, the Air Defense Command organized intelligence teams to deploy, recover, or exploit at the scene downed enemy personnel, equipment, and aircraft. The unit with responsibility for maintaining these teams was located at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. As the occasion never arose to use these air defense teams, the mission was assigned to Headquarters, United States Air Force in 1957, and expanded to include the following peacetime functions: unidentified flying objects, UFOs, to investigate reliably reported UFOs within the U.S. B is Project Moondust, to recover objects and debris from space vehicles that had survived reentry from space to Earth. And C, Operation Blue Fly, to expeditiously retrieve Soviet bloc equipment. So there is official confirmation that both Moondust and Blue Fly exist, and they're tied to basically a peacetime unit for collecting and making use of downed spacecraft.
Now, it's a weird word, vehicle, to use there, but could it be that they're talking about like satellites?
I think that is definitely a thing. Satellites, along with just like high altitude planes and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that there's, they're keeping pace with the technological advancements of the time in terms of like what is available. Like, instead of making it like a manned craft, I feel like they're also trying to cover like, balloons and drones.
Yeah.
And shit. Like, not that there were drones necessarily in 1953, but we're talking like any sort of craft. They're making it more like less specific, so they had a wider operating method.
And we know that like we were not the only country, obviously, like making weird experimental craft, and people are always spying on each other. So I don't know. It does sound like it's maybe sort of a general term to try and, like you said, make sure you're covering all your bases there.
Yeah. Mattingly also added, these teams were eventually disbanded because of a lack of activity. Project Moondust teams and Operation Blue Fly missions were similarly discontinued. The Air Force has no information that any UFOs were ever confirmed downed in the U.S. And this is also something that they believe is abjectly false. There are other released documents that state that Moondust wasn't actually discontinued. Its code name was just changed after the code name became compromised. This is where another kind of researcher named Robert G. Todd got a letter from the Air Force dated July 1st, 1987, that the nickname Project Moondust no longer officially exists. It has been replaced by another name that is not releasable. FTDs, which is Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Their duties are listed in a classified passage in a classified regulation that is being withheld because it is currently improperly classified. So there is like an official trail of this thing.
Yeah.
Did still exist at the time.
Huh.
It just was changed. The name was changed to give it anonymity again.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I didn't look too deeply into Robert G. Todd. He seems to be another person that was involved in a lot of this stuff at the time. His name came up a couple times in my research, but I didn't go too deep on him specifically because I already have a shit ton of stuff to talk about. So, a lot of the stuff that we have is from State Department records, where there's knowledge. There's places where Moondust teams were dispatched for various cases, and none of them prove an actual extraterrestrial connection. I want to make that clear. Like, we're talking about what is officially acknowledged and what isn't. These things seemingly did exist, but the intended use of these teams doesn't seem to ever have been extraterrestrials. It seems to be basically foreign nations, like downed aircraft from the Soviets or any other kind of enemy of the state, I guess.
What you would expect.
Yeah, we'll get into more of this later because there's a fun thing with an interview that I found by Stone. All of this stuff looks different now, looking at it in the lens of the disinformation campaigns, because you can see the places that they're using, that they're trying to like not confirm the normal solution, like the normal thing that this would be, which is just, oh yeah, we're gonna go and look at downed spycraft to try to recover any information or technology, and see who sent it, all that kind of stuff. That makes sense. But they specifically try not to give you that information so that people will think they're just picking up UFOs left and right, you know?
Yeah.
Now, supposedly all of the documents related to Moondust have come out from the Freedom of Information Act, except for one. The one document that has supposedly not been released was leaked, and tells the story of Marilyn Monroe and her knowledge of JFK's tour of secret UFO crash storage facilities and his contact with living alien beings.
Okay, I've heard of this. I've not looked into it, but I've heard of it.
I found there's a Mysterious Universe article that you can look up if you just look up Marilyn Roswell Mysterious Universe, it'll pop up. That details some of the stuff here, and it basically comes down to like Marilyn Monroe supposedly had this diary or like journal that she kept, and she had was rumored to have had affairs with like the Attorney General and JFK, so was really close with all of them, and was privy to some top secret stuff, including the fact that JFK was going to tour a secret military base where a crashed UFO along with living aliens recovered from said crash were. This is, of course, never been verified. This doesn't actually, this document is not publicly available except for a leaked version of it that is in no way verifiable. But it was very fun to read.
Well, that's funny. I've heard this story of like somehow Marilyn Monroe being, involved with this, like you said. But like whenever I don't know, I hear Marilyn Monroe has a diary, and I just picture, "Dear diary, today the wind blew my dress up again," and that's kind of what I imagine the contents of her diary would actually be. But UFOs is a nice surprise, I must admit.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect UFO knowledge in Marilyn Monroe's diary, but hey, maybe it is. Now there is there's like, I tried. I looked for any actual accounts of downed UFOs that these people worked on. I couldn't find like Clifford Stone telling a story of a thing. Like there's an interview that he did with a UFO researcher called Paula something. I've got it later on in my notes that supposedly goes into it. I couldn't find that full thing. But there is like an account here of on a night between March 25th and 26th in 1968 in Nepal, where 4 objects fell from the sky in that area, and the American embassy in Kathmandu sent a secret message dated July 23rd to the U.S. Air Force Field Activities Groups at Fort Belvoir that said there's an operation with full cooperation with the government of Nepal, and the subject of the message was just moon dust. So supposedly that is confirmation of like a moon dust operation in Nepal in the 60s. But I don't have, like, I couldn't find much on that. That's just like one example I found in a long article about moon dust. So
weird.
Like, I wish I had more like case studies, like, but I just did not find.
Yeah. It's making me think of like, there was like the whole aspect of the disinfo stuff that I was reading about, where it was like, oh, we went across to other countries and we did fake UFO abductions in other countries for whatever reason. And there was only the one example of vis-a-vis, that abduction being like, oh, like some MK Ultra goons like came down in a black helicopter and like dosed this guy with this poor farmer with LSD and like, what was it, like Venezuela? That was like and that was just like completely anecdotal. So. Like there was nothing to back it up, and it's just like the one mention that I saw of like, we would like do this in other countries.
Yeah, I really love when it's the whole like globe-trotting crash retrieval idea.
Yeah,
that sounds really fun. But maybe I have to get his fucking book. I don't know. I found what I thought was just his actual book online, but it really is just him like trying to work through these Freedom of Information Act documents and connect them in any way. Like there was no like fun stories section.
Yeah. I think more of these books should include those sections.
Yeah, I think like as a whole, the UFO community needs to embrace entertaining writing a little
Yeah,
more.
like a fun fact section. Ooh, a choose your own adventure like if
Ooh,
you did like
okay,
a choose
yeah.
your own adventure UFO, not like but it's all like supposed facts about UFO conspiracies.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, in 1947, do you follow the what 6 UFOs spotted over Mount Rainier? Did I say 1967 or 1947?
I think you said 47.
So yeah, 47. That's yeah. I just think they could spice it up a little bit.
See, I think you could easily do that with some of the like space super soldier stuff where the whole thing is like you go out there for 20 years and they time travel you back to your old body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like there's a built-in respawn mechanic in that story. So you could easily do a choose your own adventure where you actually get killed in each story that you don't take the right path. And then you just kind of start over. I think there's a lot of room in conspiracy.
It could definitely be more entertaining.
Books.
Put some adventure in there, which honestly, to be honest, that's been one of the sort of appealing aspects of reading Jacques Vallée is like some of his at least what I'm reading in Passport to Magonia right now. It gets pretty. I mean, it's entertaining to me. Maybe I have my brain's weird. I mean, I maybe it's just me, but I feel like the stories are interesting and entertaining. So
I haven't read any Vallée specific, like any of his actual work. I've read about him online and stuff, but I would love to find who. Okay, here's the missive for the pod world this week. Anyone out there, give us your most entertaining writers in the world of conspiracy theory. Any books that you've read that are like written in a way that isn't awful,
boring,
feel free to send some recommendations our way, because I would love to find some
something fun.
That's one thing that I will give Richard Hoagland and Mike Barra. Their book on the book that I read for the Patreon is written in a way that is actually entertaining, and in part because there's just like these whole asides where they're like talking about how they're getting persecuted by NASA and stuff, and like how there are these wide-reaching things trying to keep them from getting to the information they need, and how it's right there. Like there is a they put themselves into their work in a way that I do find entertaining.
Yeah. So. But then maybe that just goes to show that a lot of people who write about UFOs are boring people.
Yeah,
maybe.
So. There's a whole thing that I found about this document from November of 1961 that is that's supposed to be a directive to create a reinforcement for this specific intelligence team called AFCIN that has to do with like basically creating a team to bring more people in to support Project Moondust, Blue Fly, and some other operations. And Stone has put this memo or whatever it is into his book, and a thing that causes some stir in the community is that there are two versions of the same document shown by two different people that have one key difference that makes this whole thing feel weird. So basically the difference comes down to the version that's put out by our boy Clifford Stone here does not have it's just the memo, but there's a version put out by a guy named Robert Todd, who we talked about earlier, the same guy that I mentioned a little bit ago, who also was doing freedom of information stuff in this same lane at the same time. Has a copy of the same document, but it has a handwritten note at the top stating that effectively this never actually went through. Like the creation of this thing didn't actually happen. It just says it has a note action recommended section at the top of the document. So this is just like a thing that someone is pitching but doesn't get actually put through, as opposed to an official directive. Does that make sense? So there's like an idea someone had to set this thing up, that one version of it without that handwritten note basically is insinuating this is a real thing that happened, and with the handwritten note it makes it an idea pitch by somebody.
Yeah, that's okay. That's weird. But I get what you're saying. Very strange.
Yeah. So these handwritten notes are the main difference between the two versions of the document, and it leads a lot of people to look at the version that Stone had without that handwritten document, or that handwritten note, and wonder where he got it, because it kind of screams maybe the source is feeding him stuff in a way that, you know, it factors into that whole disinformation stuff we've talked about a lot. So that just, and this isn't the only thing that Stone had that there was either another version of or someone else couldn't corroborate. Like, there are things like this throughout his career that kind of lend some people to think that he believes everything he's saying. Like, he seems like someone who is passionate about and isn't like making shit up, but it seems almost like there's something else going on with how he's getting his information. There was some movement on like where Moondust actually started for real. It came out of the 4602nd, I guess, Air Intelligence Squadron in early 1953, which is before the official designation of it has been released. Like, we found out basically that the Air Force lied about when this thing was founded. It was put into regulations after the UFO wave of the summer of 1952, at least in the eyes of the people involved in this thing. And so they specifically even like worked with Blue Book early on, and then kind of continued working after Blue Book folded, in terms of just like picking up downed UFOs and doing any sort of kind of cover up or whatever to kind of gauge public reaction. It kind of got tied into stuff during the Korean War, starting in 1953, but then supposedly went away, but never actually did, if you believe everything that we've talked about so far. So the official run of Moondust was like 1957 to like 85, but people believe that it actually started in like 52.
Now, you wouldn't happen to know if its beginnings are pre or post the 1952 Washington D.C. flyover, would you?
I believe. I do you remember when that took place?
I'd have to look up. I just know it was 1952.
I think it was almost made in response to that. Because it's like right after the UFO wave of 1952. Like, basically, it's supposedly started in like the fall of 1952, and I think the UFO thing was in the summer.
I think you're right. July 1952. Yeah. Interesting. Yep.
So yeah. We're very much in that, and keep that thought going, because we'll talk about Clifford Stone.
I have thoughts, yeah. Well, but go ahead.
So when Clifford Stone, see if any of this sounds kind of familiar. His story begins when he was just a child. He claims he had several encounters with aliens, after which he was frequently visited by two military men, in particular an Air Force captain who told him that he was being watched due to his remarkable ability to interface with extraterrestrial biological entities. And this stranger, who in some accounts is described as like an actual friend of Stone's instead of like this kind of mysterious thing, but in all accounts I saw, it's like this Air Force captain made friends with this child and was like, "We're gonna get you in the military a little bit later, okay?" Which is just weird. But this captain encouraged his study of UFOs. Supposedly visiting him at least once a week, and eventually influencing him to join the military when he got a bit older. This led to him trying to enlist during Vietnam, but he was rejected due to a skin affliction and classified 4F, which 4F means we can't use you, basically. Like, there's nothing you can change, you just won't be in the military.
4F,
is what that's supposed to
frankly,
be.
fucked for fighting.
Yes.
Like, as in, you can't do any fighting for us, you're fucked.
Yeah. He was then told by a friend that the Army has much more lenient medical examinations, and he actually was able to join the Army as a clerk typist. So he never actually served in a combat capacity or anything. He went straight into the typist pool, effectively. But this didn't last long, because within weeks of becoming an Army typist, he was picked up by a staff car on the pretense of seeing a low-ranking friend with a job at the Pentagon. And when he got there, his friend's clearances allowed them into the Pentagon and onto a tram that took him to basically the secret world. Like, it's one of those things of like, oh, I was led to the Pentagon and taken to this room where I was brought into this secret organization.
Yeah. Now, I feel like I should clarify that the reason I was laughing a moment ago is because you said typist pool. And I just kind of imagined a bunch of young military men being thrown into a pool, like a swimming pool, and they have like flotation devices that have typewriters on them. They're typing on them in the pool. Yeah. It's kind of where the mental image that I sort of created when you said that.
That's really good.
So we can move on from that.
That is like the actual term of like a room just filled with people typing official memos and shit. But it does always evoke like a flash of like, oh, a bunch of wet guys having to type.
Yeah, that's in a pool. That's just kind of where my mind went, because I have a very unique mind, Niall, and you know this about me.
Welcome to your twisted mind. So the more official version of his military history is that he did spend 22 years in the Army, entering right out of high school, and was trained as a clerk typist. He was then deployed to Vietnam, of which he served 4 tours, although his military records showed that he had been overseas for 37 months, and not all of it was actually in Vietnam. So there is some kind of like weird stuff about like where he actually served and what he was doing. When he arrived in Vietnam, he wanted to be a part of a combat unit, but he was rejected. I do not know where, like, I only found this part in one source. I do not know where it came from, because it says that because he was rejected for combat, he would sneak out at night, and according to him, he would sneak out at night to hunt the enemy. I did not find any official record of this, but supposedly this guy kept being told he couldn't be a combatant and had to type up stuff instead. So he went out and did Rambo shit. Oh my God.
So those are always the best tidbits too, where it's like you're cross-referencing like 6 different sources and exactly one tells you the weirdest goddamn fact of the whole thing. Yeah. Or fact is a strong term, but
it's like the whole thing of him being able to like be really good at communicating with extraterrestrials. First of all, I don't know how they found that out in a kid. And second of all, that's not a thing that's listed everywhere. He does talk about that in terms of like why he got assigned to this specific unit for downed UFOs and stuff. But like a lot of the more official or like more scientific-y type UFO accounts kind of leave that part out, where he claims that he's like telepathic with aliens basically. So that's not in all accounts of this, but it is something that he did claim. So, yeah.
Yeah, and between all that, he was out fucking hunting down Viet Cong for some reason.
He was leading a one-man guerrilla warfare against the entire country of Vietnam, I guess. I don't, that part blows.
I wish this dude wasn't dead so somebody could ask him about this. Hopefully somebody asked him about this at some point.
This is a guy that I'll probably come back to in my own research, just because the little loose ends that were left in doing this research are some of the most tantalizing little bits like that.
I love it.
So here is where we get into what you mentioned earlier. Upon entering the military, he was first given training at a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare facility at Fort Lee in Virginia. And so this was after being a typist for a while. This was his like actual government, his actual Army job was to be part of this. I think they call them like NBC or something, like nuclear, biological, chemical warfare unit that is that goes out to basically deal with hazmat shit when planes go down and stuff.
Okay.
But then he claims he was, recruited into a secret like elite sub organization of that thing called the Interplanetary Phenomena Research Unit, which was, by his account, started in 1943 by General Douglas MacArthur for the purpose of gathering intelligence on alien activities on Earth, studying alien entities and their technology, and retrieving the wreckage of downed UFOs.
That's literally the Men in Black.
Yeah. I do not know how this dovetails specifically with Moondust, because like this seems like they both are doing the same thing. I don't know if like the IPRU is like a subset of Moondust, or if Moondust is like the governmental project designation and then this is the actual unit or whatever. Like I could not find how these things dovetail together, because most places that talk about Moondust don't talk about the IPRU, and the IPRU is talked about in a place that doesn't really talk about Moondust. So go figure.
Also, to be clear, when I say the Men in Black, I mean Will Smith Oscar slap
Yeah.
Men in Black, not, you know, vaguely humanoid, pale faced freak Men in Black.
Yeah.
Okay. Just being clear.
So Stone claims that this unit had been formed in response to the Foo Fighters during Foo Fighters was World War One, right?
The Foo Fighters were not around during World War One.
Sorry, World War Two.
The band, not the.
Yeah, Everlong was a big thing for these guys. They had to clean up a lot of people crying for how touching that song is.
Yeah, they were they were at the camp playing Everlong for the soldiers.
Yeah. So yeah, this unit was brought in to deal with all that kind of shit. Stone has done a lot of interviews with various ufologists, including Dr. Michael Sala, who we'll talk about in a little bit.
Okay.
Dr. Stephen M. Greer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, these names are all making a lot of sense. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Paola Harris, Paola.
Yeah.
That's the one that supposedly talks about his escapades in the fucking Moondust unit, but I was unable to find that full interview. So yeah, he talks about how his duties were for this like shadowy organization, and he was part of this retrieval unit stationed at Fort McClellan Army base in Alabama, and would be called away whenever there was a top secret assignment for a retrieval. In his recalling, the team was not originally devoted to alien spacecraft, but rather to suspicious foreign objects that came down to Earth. But as the UFO stuff increased, the unit kind of became the ones that took over all the UFO crashes. So that change, I guess, happened in like 1957. He supposedly they would always operate under the guise of being a nuclear containment team, which is what he actually was trained for, so he could play the part. And they always carefully orchestrated these retrievals to make it appear that they were checking out a crashed aircraft or a nuclear incident, even planting fake news reports in the media to complete the whole facade. And he explains the thought process of these retrievals as this. Now, in order to prepare me for this, very early on in my career, they sent me to NBC school at Fort McClellan, Alabama. It's a 3-week school. It's for NBC personnel, which is nuclear, biological, chemical warfare stuff. That's the NBC. And it would always be in the context of an NBC unit that I would be involved in UFO retrievals. You would go ahead and deploy as though it was a nuclear accident. There are procedures already established on nuclear or biological or chemical accidents, so you would proceed in that way. If you could get in there and do recoveries, if you could go in and extract the debris that are there quietly behind the scenes and no one knows, you'd do it. If you needed an officially sanctioned deception program to come into play, such as a bogus news release, you could do this also. For example, if you have an airplane accident, we have standard procedures on how we handle that. Those same procedures are utilized when you do a recovery or extraction of a crashed ET spacecraft or debris thereof. And I have to stress debris simply because these are highly advanced technical machines. There were not that many crashes. They are flawed because they are made by an intelligence that is as mortal as you or me. Being mortal, we are subject to error. Now we are talking about a highly intelligent civilization, not a highly incompetent civilization. We take steps and they take steps. But at the same time, when you go out, you make a recovery, and when you make that recovery, you handle it the same way you would as if you were out there on an airplane accident or you have a hazardous material type situation, because it works. It is all set up. But this guy talks in himself in circles a lot, but he explains that they go out in trucks, use these, have code words for the various things you could pick up so that you're not heard talking about alien craft. And he even claims to have actually taken some of the material found at one of these sites Specifically, he took a small fragment of metal from a 1973 UFO crash that he recovered, that he hid in his shoe, to get it away, and then eventually he took it home and buried it on his property near his home in New Mexico. But he will not have it in his house, so he has it buried outside.
So what you're saying is this is not the same NBC as the one that put out Night Court.
Yes, this is not the Night Court NBC.
Okay.
This is this is basically a hazmat
Okay,
squad.
gotcha. So why is he
I-
taking hazardous materials home?
Look, you work on enough NBC stuff, you over time
You
become
you
interested.
get a little bit of affection for the
Well,
potentially dangerous piece of plastic or whatever.
and also something that we haven't gotten into yet. Man, might be a longer episode than I was trying to make it. Is he over time became kind of disgruntled with this whole thing and wanted to move on and leave, but he kind of got like blackmailed by a person above him in this structure to stay and continue doing UFO retrievals because he was trained on it. He had a proven track record, and they didn't want to lose him as an asset. So he ended up basically like having to like politic his way out of this unit and threaten to like basically become a full-blown whistleblower for them to let him go in exchange for keeping silent on certain things, which I believe is his justification for doing most of the stuff through Freedom of Information Act requests and only talking about that kind of stuff, as opposed to specifically laying out everything he ever did in this unit. He basically had kind of a bargain to free him from this job.
Okay, gotcha. Weird.
But another thing that you'll find when you look up Clifford Stone is that he talks about this manual called the EBE Guidebook, which is EBE stands for Extraterrestrial Biological Entity.
Yep, I know the term.
And this is a book that is supposedly given to people dealing with this kind of stuff that contains information, including physiology, food requirements, and medical information for all of the 57 known species of aliens that have been cataloged by the time he retired. So he has if you look up Clifford Stone on I was using DuckDuckGo, whatever the fuck, a lot of places will talk about Clifford Stone's 57 aliens. He goes through them all at a conference that there are a lot of YouTube clips of. But you can find lists of them online. I have a list further down in my notes if we get to it, but it has supposedly this is all of the 57 different types of aliens and where they come from that the U.S. government is aware of.
Okay, interesting. I'll have to look and see what the rundown is there. I'm trying to remember what case it was that I read the phrase EBE, because I feel like a specific type of UFO and alien whistleblower guy uses the term EBE, but I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, it gets used with this era of people quite a bit. I feel like it's the people that were still around when UFO was being used, but were trying to make something more specific than ET. And now UFO has been replaced with
UAP.
Yeah. And I think EBE has replaced ET. There's these kind of progression of terminology over time. But the last big chunk of what I have here is an interview with Dr. Michael Salla that Stone did, where he talks about some of his worries about being part of disclosure, and specifically mentioned some people that we've talked about before.
Was he claiming to be blackmailed because of him releasing this information, or was he actually
the blackmail was to keep him in the retrieval unit?
Right, but why didn't they want him to leave?
Because he was really good at his job, and it's hard to, I guess it's hard to come across people that can do this job, I guess. It really was just they were trying to keep him from quitting, was the blackmail thing.
I feel like you don't need to blackmail somebody in a government role necessarily. I mean, they could just pay him more.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
I don't know how all that shit works. I've never worked for a shady secret government organization, but I'm guessing it works kind of like the mafia. You're not supposed to actually leave.
Yeah, I'm
you
just
kind of.
I'm thinking from my perspective here of like, whenever I've considered leaving a company, the thing that is only ever bring me back is we're going to pay you more money. Like, I don't know, but that's
like
just me.
Supposedly after he left this thing, he worked as a mall security guard, which is also where like a shift happened for him, because this is dark. Sorry guys, if you don't want to hear something dark, skip forward like a minute. He was called to the scene of a motorcycle accident, and that motorcycle accident happened to be his son. And his son died in this crash. And he, in an interview I watched, he really danced around it, specifically whether or not he was actually insinuating this, but he kind of insinuated that his son's motorcycle crash mimicked a lot of a specific like motorcycle assassination technique that he witnessed in Vietnam, where you basically, due to like the traffic conditions in Vietnam, they would do this thing where they would ride up next to an assassination target and at like a red light poke this like stick with a really sharp nail coming out of the end of it into the spokes of the wheel, so that when the bike would start moving again, the nail would like break, explode the tire, and then all the people surrounding them would have already started moving, so they get like swarmed by all the other traffic, and it's a way to like conveniently make it look like a motorcycle accident.
Jeez.
And he likens this thing that has happened to his son to that, but I can't tell if he's actually says that he thinks that his son was murdered or not. It's a whole thing.
Oh boy.
But supposedly
That's
after
rough.
this incident is when he really started to push more publicly with a lot of his stuff. It almost felt like that was a breaking point that led him to be much more vocal about these things. So, but this interview with Michael Salla, he talks about working in this whole organization and everything, but also about like how he is very careful about what he says and releases, because he only puts out stuff that you can get verified by the U.S. government, or at least kind of is based around that stuff, because he was very aware of the way that like ufologists leaking actual classified shit got treated and even sometimes murdered. He specifically brings up that he did know Paul Benowitz, and also had known Richard Doty as well. So I'm just going to read this bit here. He says, starting but a mutual friend of ours who knew I was heavily into UFOs, when he found out who I was and what I was doing at the time, he says, you know, you got to keep away from him, because if they decide they're going to take him out, they aren't picky. And if you're there too, you'll be taken out too. Now, the guy they're talking about here is one of his friends who was doing research on the 1980 UFO incident in the UK called Bentwaters.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he's basically saying, you know, that they will kill you.
They'll kill indiscriminately.
You'd have 2 unsolved murders as opposed to 1. But I never felt threatened. I never felt like there was going to be any repercussions. The only repercussions I had was when I was assigned here at Roswell and they were hitting upon Paul Benowitz. And I got, how can I put this? I got very verbal about what they were doing to Paul. And Michael Salla asks, what was it that you were aware of they were doing to Paul that concerned you? He replies, Paul was onto something and he's dead now. The person who they identified as Falcon was involved in that. And Michael Salla asks, was that Richard Doty?
Yeah.
And he replies, Richard Doty, and I'm sorry, is acting under orders. Paul had film footage, he had pictures, he had audio recordings of something, quote, not found in nature is the best way to put it. And when he had the meeting with the Air Force personnel, well, they said, yes, there's something there, but you know we no longer investigate UFOs, so we really aren't interested. Well, they were interested enough to get copies of everything he had, and then it took a sinister side. The sinister side was to go ahead and drive this person totally insane, and that ultimately led to his untimely death.
It's interesting.
So he specifically has knowledge of those cases and stuff. And Salla has this kind of weird relationship with Stone's work, because he seems to trust that Stone is pretty forthcoming with everything he's saying, doesn't think the guy's like a charlatan or anything. but Sala is specifically trying to like look at all of Stone's work through the lens of the Majestic 12 documents, and specifically a thing called Special Operations Manual, Psalm 101, which was a supposed field manual for procedure on dealing with downed UFOs that leaked in 1994, but was written in 1954. So Sala thinks that like Stone is on the right track of a lot of things and is pretty reputable, and you can mostly believe what he says, but his problems with him come from like fully committing to the Majestic 12 stuff, and that Stone doesn't really believe in the Majestic 12 documents. So yeah.
That's a point in his corner, I'll say.
Yeah. But lastly, just some stuff. This comes from a the obituary for Clifford Stone, as written by the guy that I was talking about earlier, Kevin Randall. But Stone was also a figure of controversy. He claimed repeatedly that he had been involved in some of the biggest UFO cases, and said that he had been a member of a secret crash retrieval team. As a teenager, he said that he had been near the Kecksburg UFO crash and had seen the military flatbed that removed the object from the woods near the Pennsylvania town. Later, he would say that as an enlisted soldier, he had glimpsed part of the alien autopsy film when it was shown to high-ranking officers on the military post where he had been assigned. The film was later admitted to be a hoax. So yeah, like these are the kinds of things like that document that was there are two versions of, and some other stuff throughout his career that bring some people to kind of question some of the things that he puts out there, because he also claims to have seen these things that have been actively shown to be hoaxes. Mm-hmm. And also just like happens to have been the Forrest Gump of UFOs, you know?
Yeah.
Like has been around all of these different events.
Yeah.
So there is that whole thing. He also goes on to describe the first time he met Stone in February of 1989 in Roswell. He was with one of his other ufologist friends named Don Schmidt, and Don had Clifford Stone at his house, and they were talking. You know, he talked all about the 57 different alien races that are visiting Earth.
The 57 different flavors of Dr. Pepper.
I straight up the section of my notes have 58 Clifford Stone's 57 alien races and herbs and spices is my like little joking subheading to myself. But basically the whole thing that this guy has about Stone, Randall says about Stone, is that Stone was very interested in the theatrics of these things. Like he would like be talking to you at a conference and be like, oh, I've got this top secret document in my car. And you'd come in and it would have like the full top secret cover page, and it would be in like a folder, and would make a really big deal about pulling it out and showing everybody. And he would always like, you know, like he would be really into the kind of clandestine nature of all these things in a way that didn't inspire a lot of confidence in some people. So like, his actual writings seem to be somewhat believed by people in the ufology community, but there are these kind of detractions from him that make him a bit of a controversial figure in some ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, that's most of what I have here, other than I do have the full list of 57 alien races, but that almost feels like a different episode. But if you want to hit
name
one,
a couple?
I can pull this up.
Give us a couple,
yeah,
maybe?
let's go ahead and
that'd be kind of fun.
Bust this link open. I put it in as a link in my notes as opposed to trying to
bullet point each alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, understandable.
So let's just go down the page to a random place. Well, I accidentally went straight to the grays, and we already know what those are. So let's go the greens.
Okay.
Humans of normal size, yet who possess an olive green skin color. They claim to be from a subterranean or cavernous realm beneath Europe, which they refer to as St. Martin's Land. So there you go.
Okay.
He also claims that the Romani people might have some connection with UFOs, which I don't
This will
know
be
exactly
tasteful.
what to do with that. Yeah, it's definitely, and he does not call them the Romanis, but this also is from like quite a few years ago. So several sources refer to these remindings as having some connection with UFO mystery. Other sources suggest a connection with high-tech subsurface kingdoms such as Agartha, etc. They possess an ancient knowledge of war and UFO craft. Yeah, a bunch of nonsense. But then there's, let's see here, the Genosians. This is
I've seen that
allegedly
name.
a planet on which human beings live or once lived. They apparently arrived on the planet some thousands of years ago, according to certain contactees, and had all along retained dim memories and legends concerning their ancient homeworld, planet Earth, where their ancestors lived long before the colonization of the planet Janos.
Isn't that the planet that in Star Wars, like Episode 3, they have the big like battle in the
It's close. That like Genosian, I think it's
yeah,
like one
and
letter off. But
they photoshopped that one guy from The Sopranos into that scene, you know?
Yeah. I'd forgotten about that. But I'm so glad you brought up fucking Star Wars, my man.
Oh, okay.
Because the Jawas are in here.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, why wouldn't they be?
They are named after their resemblance to the creatures in the film Star Wars.
Okay.
This group is distinguished by their clothing. They wear hoods and robes, are generally short, between 3 and 4.5 feet tall, and their faces are concealed by the shadows thrown by their hoods. There's also been reports that the species has glowing eyes.
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, everybody knows fucking Jawas. You either want to or wait, Jawa. Oh, I was thinking of I don't give a shit. It's Star Wars. Who gives a fuck? I don't remember the different names, but yeah, I can picture a Jawa.
The sand people. Right?
Yeah, they're the little guys with the hoods and the.
Were you thinking of Ewoks?
I was thinking of Ewoks. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, that's kind of my run on UFO retrieval and Clifford Stone.
I love that.
There's probably more that I could do on this at a later date, but this already is long for a normal episode. So, and I also didn't want to make another 2-parter so soon. So
his name is Richard Stone.
Which one?
Is that what his name's Richard Clifford? Jesus, did I? My brain is doing this thing where like we're in conspiracy mode, and I'm like the name's Stone. Okay. Here's how my brain works, by the way. Okay. For people who have maybe not picked up on it, especially when I'm like tired, right?
Yeah.
Oh, UFOs, conspiracy theory? Stone, last name Stone. Alex Jones knows our last name Stone, conspiracy theory. He says it funny. He says Stone. Roger Stone. And then flip that around and somehow mix Clifford in with Roger.
I thought it was that we were talking about Richard Doty and
Richard Doty didn't help
Stone.
either.
Yeah.
So Richard Stone is a new guy that I just made up who is somewhere in between Roger Stone and Clifford Stone.
Yeah.
Somebody out there draw fan art of that guy, maybe come up with a backstory and email it to us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, that works. Also fun, good conspiracy books. This I guess that'll bring us to a big question.
Yeah, let's do it.
And my big question for you this week is we've talked about a lot of like secret government projects and stuff. And so I want to know if you were to try to work for one secret government alien related project, what job would you be applying for?
Man, that is so tough because that's really tough.
Yeah.
It would be my first instinct is to say Project Blue Book. Just because like that's the like I'm giving you a very sincere answer here. The that era of UFO stuff like from the late 40s up through the 60s, like late 60s, that's just the coolest stuff to me. That's like my favorite stuff to read about. So like to be there with Project Blue Book would be very interesting, but I don't think I don't like if I'm working alongside, Hynek and his crew, I don't think I'm necessarily, getting any closer to knowing the truth about the UFO phenomenon.
You kind of have a vested interest in untruth at that point.
Yeah, and Hynek has his own frustrations after Project Blue Book that suggests that he wasn't always getting the full story. So it would be cool to join the cleanup crew, but I want that's such a tough question. And it like being like one of the scientists who like has to like deal with aliens or whatever, that's always because like you're down in an underground base and a bunch of aliens have hair trigger, guns on their hips or whatever, and they start firing laser beams and killing everybody. And that, like, I don't want to deal with that either.
Yeah.
But maybe it would be cool to be a Man in Black.
Okay. That
would be this is of course in the version of the Men in Black where like they work for the government. They're not just like weird alien entities that have their own agenda, like these are Men in Black that are like sent out basically in disguise to like mind wipe people and like, cover up the story. Because I feel like if you're covering up the story, you're going to know what the real story is, right? Like,
yeah.
And you get to meet all these people and hear like, we find out what they saw. And now the thing that sucks, of course, is making them forget. If your heart isn't in it, making people forget what they saw with regards to UFOs, and mine probably wouldn't be. I'm so conflicted over this question. This is really fucked, Niall.
Yeah, I didn't expect to put you on like an actual, I didn't expect you to have to pontificate as much about this, but it's good that you're thinking about it. Because like,
maybe I'll say Blue Book. I'll put it at that.
I'm honestly trying to remember the actual name of a thing that I did on an episode forever ago. There was an episode that I did on people that were like taking care of a captured alien in like a deep underground military base, and the alien was like not hostile and was like just kind of chilling in a special room that people were then this guy went in and like interviewed him. I think it would be fun to be like to not deal with like the intense like aliens trying to kill people, but doing just like dealing with the ones
exit interviews.
Like, chill. Yeah, like just the being a caretaker of like some chill aliens that are just like not trying to kill me would be a pretty
an extraterrestrial hiring manager.
Yeah, just like just like taking care of shit for these little weird dudes from another planet that just want to be left alone, I guess.
Yeah,
and,
no, I can respect that idea.
That's my vibe.
Get to meet up with a bunch of different kinds of aliens, and presumably the aliens that do want to kill us don't really like pass the sort of entrance to working with us. You see what I'm saying? So like you wouldn't have to deal with them. We're talking about you're dealing with aliens that like are coming and staying with us in a less violent way.
Yeah, I don't want to be involved with like a military unit that has to have these like space guns at all times to deal with like, rowdy alien. Like I'm not talking the Dulce base people here. I'm talking I'm talking much more calm situation.
You could have stopped at I don't want to be with the military unit.
Yeah,
I would have understood. Although I guess that's where I put myself. Is Project Blue Book is an Air Force
it is
thing. So,
but like it's also. I mean, it is, but they're not like actively going out and shooting people.
I'm envisioning hanging out with like this UFO researching astronomer, right? That's what I'm talking about. That sounds interesting to me. So
yeah, I think that works. So I'm gonna stop trying to look through all of our episodes to remember the name of this thing because I just don't remember.
It wasn't Dulce Base.
No, it was
Dulce?
A separate thing. Dulce Base. There are aliens down there for like alien-human hybridization experiments, but this was a different thing. But it was back during that wave of things, I think, that I got really into secret military bases and aliens stored in them. So yeah, that will kind of wrap us up for the week. Kyle, do you want to take care of some business?
Let's do it.
So if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. Do you like video games? Well, I have great news. We do have a Twitch channel that you can go follow us and check us out. We play video games on there, although it's in the works. It's in my plans. I have a big note written at the top of a notebook in bold letters that says Alien Chat show on Twitch. So I'm going to try and do that sometime too. So that'll be a thing. If you want to check that out, check us out on Twitch, and then email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Send me your best interpretations of Richard Stone. I would love to see what Richard Stone looks like. I mean, you got his basic idea in this episode, and I want to see what people think he looks like.
Cool.
Patreon.com/itgetsweird. Look, we've got a $2 tier. We've got a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you can find It Gets Weird TV, where we are talking about currently X-Files Season 1. We discuss the episode. We talk about our thoughts and feelings on it. Maybe we get some trivia in there, and we talk about how it relates to real world, ufology and things like that. So if that sounds cool, that's at the $2 tier, and that episode comes out every other week. That show releases every other week. On the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV, you're going to have to go to the $5 tier, where you're going to get extra bonus content that fills in the weeks that It Gets Weird TV is not being put out. So you're getting bonus content every single week at the $5 tier. Sometimes it's me doing a show. Sometimes it's Niall doing a show. Sometimes it's both of us. It's a lot of different stuff. So, but whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out with listeners and chatting about this stuff all the time. If you've ever wanted to pick our brains about UFOs and conspiracies, that's where you're going to do it. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, here's a tip. I like your show. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1. And we appreciate it if you donate to that tier as well. If you can't donate to It Gets Weird podcast, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird.
All right. Thank you all for listening. This has been It Gets Weird podcast. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.
Peace.